Done.
Hello, everybody. Please remember to sign into the chat. Sign in. The attendance sheet is in the chat. Also, let's see. Let's call this meeting to order at 6:43. And
34.
sorry, 6:34. Apologies. I'm going to call the roll. Camille Cazzaretti.
Present.
Antonia Ferraro. Yes, I'm here. Council member Tia Shelsteed.
Here.
Bess Abrams.
Here.
Kimberly Scott.
Present.
Claudia Lechuga.
Present.
Yvonne Banda.
Present.
Mark Bizzard.
Present.
And Crystal Kaysen. Okay, and Superintendent Scott.
Present.
Great. All right. I am now going to turn it over to Bess for the approval of the minutes.
Zaida and I worked together and we have the February 9th minutes ready to go. Does anyone have any questions about them? Okay.
Could you just drop the links in the chat so that the members of the public could also access the document?
I can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Do we do that regularly? I have not. No, maybe Zaida does it usually. Okay. So I'd like to make a motion, give everyone a few minutes if anyone in the public wants to look at that. But I will make a first motion to approve the minutes from February 9th.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Camille. Are there any questions, public or members? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. How do I? Actually, Antonia, can you do
Yeah,
that?
I can do it. Yeah, Camille.
Approved.
Yes, Antonia approves. Tia Shelsteed.
Approved.
Bess Abrams.
Approved.
Kimberly Scott.
Approved.
Claudia Lechuga.
Approve.
Yvonne Banda.
Approve.
And Mark Bizzard.
Approved.
Okay,
Great.
thank you, everybody. Unanimous.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the District 15 Community Education Council meeting tonight. We appreciate your time and we're glad you could join us. For those of you who are new to CEC meetings, there are 32 CECs throughout the city plus 4 citywide councils. Each CEC represents a community school district and each is made up of 11 volunteer members, 9 of whom are elected by PTA leaders in the district. The remaining members are appointed by the Brooklyn Borough President. CEC15 is a state mandated public body responsible for ensuring that public school parents and the public have input in educational decisions that are made at the school district level. Our council reviews education policies and advocates for high quality education that benefit all of our District 15 public elementary and middle school students. There are 35 elementary and middle schools in D15. CEC members serve in an advisory role on education matters to the district superintendent, the chancellor of the Department of Education, and elected officials. We approve district school zoning lines submitted by the Department of Education. We evaluate our district superintendent and we review the district's educational programs and support school leadership teams. We also submit recommendations for the School Construction Authority's annual capital plan. In conjunction with the DOE, we hold joint public hearings on proposals affecting schools in our district. Currently, we are working with the DOE to collaboratively and effectively rezone 7 schools in subzone 3. We actively seek input and feedback from the public and encourage you to visit our website, cecd15.org, or take a look at our Facebook page and write to us about any issues you may want to address or learn about. All of our names and contact info are available on the website. And now I am going to turn it over to Yvonne Banda for the teleconference protocol.
Good evening, everybody. Due to the COVID-19 health crisis, CEC15 will be practicing social distancing. We will be conducting meetings through teleconferencing until further notice. Tonight's calendar meeting will include a public comment period so that we might allow for additional feedback from our school communities. The general rule of engagement are, for your own privacy, we ask that you turn off your camera and please use audio only. Please also sign in to the Google Doc link in the chat. When you comment, please respect the privacy of others. Please do not include names of children or staff. The public comment period is meant for comment, but as a customary, CEC15 wants to hear your comments and concerns and help you get them addressed as needed. When answers cannot be given in session, we will provide them in our weekly e-blast or in an upcoming meeting. Please sign up for CEC15 emails at cec15@schools.nyc.gov. Public comments. If you want to comment, please identify yourself by using the raise hand feature. Please include your question and contact information in the chat. If you are calling in, press asterisk number 9, asterisk and 9 to comment. We will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. Speakers will be called on one at a time and will be allowed 1 minute each for comment. Speakers will be prioritized from the sign-in sheet via the chat or by emailing cec15@schools.nyc.gov prior to the meeting. We will hear as many speakers as the time allows. If you prefer not to speak, but will still like to submit a question or comment, it is possible that not every question will be given time. So the best way to get your question answered is always to write to the CEC. Remember to sign the attendance sheet. Por favor, llene la hoja de asistencia. Thanks. Next, we have the contracts for excellent presentation with a total of 20 minutes. I will call you when it's the last 2 minutes. I will give you the time that you got 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Anita, do we know if our presenter is here? I don't see her name in the list.
I just sent her the link. She was having some trouble getting in. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
Anita, and I can start, and we kind of tag team anyway. So
Sure.
we'll start if you'd like.
Thanks. That would be great. Thank you so much.
I know how busy your schedule is tonight. Put up the other one first, Ida, please. We have 2 PowerPoints, one for my presentation and one for this one. For the C4E. There we go. Thank you. Perfect. So I'm going to start and Loretta will join me. As you know, yearly, the Department of Ed presents to the CECs our contracts for excellence plan for the coming year. So without further ado, let me explain what this is. For those of you who don't know, in 2006, there was a court decision that stemmed from a case that said New York City provides more funding to the state than it receives in support of education based on percentages. And the Court of Appeals agreed that this was true and ordered that every child is entitled to a sound basic education and that the state was responsible to increase funding for New York City public schools based on the amount they contributed. And so for the first year, 2007, 2008, they received funds from the state. It's called Foundation Aid, that were required to meet certain categorical spending requirements. The funds were first received, as I said, in 2007 and 2008, and they have to be distributed to schools to meet the requirements and to deal with designated programs at the central level. And all of this was set forth in the Contract for Excellence, which most of us refer to as C4E legislation. Next slide, please. So these are the initiatives that are required to be funded by C4E. Class size reduction, time on task, teacher and principal quality initiatives, middle school and high school restructuring, full day pre-kindergarten programs, and model programs for English language learners. Now, class size reduction, which I will explain later, is impacted by this, but it is at specific schools. Time on task focuses on students who may need or require additional support and individualized attention, such as AIS. Teacher and principal quality initiatives are designed to help provide professional development and retention of high quality teachers and principals, again, to raise achievement in specifically struggling schools. Middle and high school restructuring also deals with reducing class size and restructuring in struggling schools. Full day pre-kindergarten programs is self-explanatory, and model programs are aimed at supporting best practices for English language learners. Next slide, please.
You're not even close to the hallway.
The funds are specifically designed to be used for student populations such as English language learners, students in poverty, students with different disabilities, and students with low academic achievement or at risk of not graduating. And these are supposed to be reflected in the school's comprehensive educational plan to meet the need of students in the greatest need. The funds, and this is incredibly important, funds must be supplemental and not supplant. So in other words, these are funds that are designed to be additional to local funding or other grants and not in place of local funding or other plans. Next slide, please. Okay. This is designed to show the amount of money that is restricted and unrestricted. Unrestricted funds are not subject to C4E rules and may be used as needed. 183 million is embedded in fair student funding, which is the primary funding source for schools. Details for fair student funding can be found and we did a presentation on fair student funding earlier in the year. The restricted funds must comply with C4E guidelines. 348 million is distributed through school-specific allocations. The state has not given DOE any additional C4E funding over the amount it provided last year. Now, I need to explain that so you'll understand. So part of the issue with C4E is that the state was given a mandate to pay additional fundings and to give a certain amount every year. Unfortunately, in 2008, when the recession hit, the state said it did not have enough money, and so it has never really paid the full C4E that it was expected to pay. And therefore, they get the same amount pretty much every year. And they are what is called a maintenance of efforts status, meaning that they can only maintain the programs that were approved consistently in prior years. They don't have the additional funding to expand. Next slide, please. So this is slide number 6, and it is a description of the preliminary plan for 2021, which is what we're talking about. Notice that the maintenance of effort is 30 million at 9%. Targeted allocations is 104 million at 30%. And discretionary allocations, that money to schools, is 214 million at 61%. This is a preliminary plan. This is what is put forward, and the funds are subject to public engagement process, which is what we're doing tonight. All schools have received the exact same funding that they received last year. And again, we are in a maintenance of effort space. Next slide, please. So the discretionary allowance to schools, 214 million in restricted contracts for excellent funds were released to 1,400 plus schools in May 2020. That is 61% of the total restricted contract funds. They are designed to be used to continue C4E programs. If a school cannot maintain the effort because of significant changes in student population or its overall instructional strategy, it could choose to reallocate funds to a different allowable program area. So let me explain what this means. This means that if a school, let's say, has a large E&L population, and over the course of a few years, that population dwindles, but they have a large special needs population, they can take the money that was for the E&L population, support the smaller E&L population, and then give some of it to the larger special needs population. But they cannot decide to give it to an area that or a group that does not fit into the requirement. Next one, please. Okay. About 104 million of C4E funds are targeted for specific programs. We're going to talk about that. 30% of the total restricted contract funds. Funds will be allocated directly to schools for specific programs. One of those programs is ICT, formerly called Collaborative Team Teaching, or CTT. One of those programs which we benefit from is full day pre-K. And one of those programs are the ASD Nest or Horizon classrooms. The other maintenance of effort, 30 million, is restricted, and the department proposes to spend these funds on summer school programs impacting the children with the lowest academic achievement in the city, and that's how summer school is funded. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to be very specific about this slide. This is slide number 9, because this comes into the question that is often asked around C4E. Much of the criticism of the New York City Department of Ed C4E spending is that we do not use enough money to reduce class size. This slide demonstrates how much of the 348 million goes for paying for teachers and other school-based staff. So if you notice, the teachers receive 92% of the C4E restricted money, 321 million. In addition, there are pupil personnel service providers such as speech professionals, OT, PT, adaptive phys ed, etc., who receive 17.6 million or 5%, and then other personnel services and administrators who receive 3%. So this is where the money really goes, to providing the personnel to support these programs. And I want to be clear that I said it the right way. Yes, okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is now we're talking about District 15, and you're going to see that where we were just talking about large amounts of money, these are going to be significantly smaller. Schools were allocated discretionary contracts for excellent funds. Schools have proposed to spend these funds as follows. So what you're seeing is how the schools have allocated their money in total. Class size reduction, or the teachers, or for ICT classes and other classes, $1,963,460, or 37.98%. Full day pre-K in some schools is $12,430, or 0.24%. Notice that middle and high school restructuring we do not use money for that, in that we do not have what are considered the struggling schools. Model programs for L support is $1,390,653, or 26.90%. Please note, we have District 15 has a large L population, and sometimes when people think about our district, they do not realize that we have a large L population, so this is critical. Teacher and principal quality initiatives, again, $90,223, or 1.75%. And time on task, and this is AIS supports, additional people to provide such supports, $1,712,792, or 33.13%, for a total in District 15 of $5,169,558. And that is the total C4E budget in District 15. Next slide, please. So this gives you a breakdown citywide and district-wide, and I'm not going to go through all the numbers here for you. These are maintenance of class size. Now, I want to explain that because I think it's important, and every time we've done this, I've explained this. Because we were dealt with getting less money than was expected, and consistently have gotten less money than expected. The money that is maintaining class size, the teacher money, is actually going towards class size, because we would be in even worse shape if we didn't have this. We are doing all of these things to minimize class size growth, to reduce class size, team teaching strategies. Again, we talked about ICT. We talked about all of the supports that are in place, all of the teaching supports that are in place. Time on task is AIS supports, dedicated instruction, individual tutoring, which we do not do in our district, and summer school, which we don't do in our district because we fall under the central DOE umbrella for summer school. So the biggest piece that we get is $1,538,059 for dedicated instruction, again, towards teachers. And then the last piece, teacher and principal quality initiatives, you can see that we are paying for some teacher coaches, or $90,000. So in total, we are using most of the money for teaching staff. Time on task is additional AIS support, and then teacher coaches, a small amount. So this is how it is breaking down in District 15. Next slide, please. Okay, notice that in District 15, we don't have middle and high school restructuring. We do have $706,038, our total full day pre-K, And we have $1,390,653 for ELL programs and supports through in our schools with our large ENL populations. Next slide, please. Okay, so class size is an allowable activity during the 2020-2021 school year. They are working to reduce class size, but where they will be doing this is in the lowest performing schools. This is why we don't get as much bang for the buck, so to speak, in District 15, as many of our schools are not considered low performing. What is important to note is that the Commissioner of Education has determined that the original 5-year C4E class size plan, which was created in 2007, when it was issued, is no longer in effect. Now, I'm assuming that that means that they no longer have to live up to those financial expectations. So, next slide, please. I now turn it over to public comment. As you know, this is being recorded, and I am happy to take questions that I can answer, and Loretta, I'm sure, will help me with questions. Feel free to comment. If you do not wish to comment publicly, you can email a comment to contractsforexcellence@schools.nyc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Yvonne, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to moderate the public comment. And then when the public comments are done, we can go through the CEC member list.
Okay, so we have 15 minutes for.
I don't see anybody with any questions in the chat. Yvonne?
No questions in the. No questions in the chat. There's some people asking for the attendance, but I haven't seen for the attendance sheet. Oh, is there now? Okay.
If
Superintendent Scott, are you able to put the email if people wanted to submit comments anonymously or not through the public knowledge? I didn't write down that email. I would do it myself. I'm sorry.
So we're waiting for the public to.
Well, if anybody wants to raise their hand, we can unmute them if they would like to speak.
Anybody?
Should we go to the CEC member questions, and then if anybody has a question that they want to drop in the chat, they can do that. Maybe questions will come up as the council members are asking.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Do you have
Okay.
any questions, Camille?
Actually, yes. Anita, thank you so much. As always, so many of our schools are in desperate need of funding. With the DOE clawing back funds, there is really a deep need to understand how the flow of money is working. So I thank you for this presentation. And for the budget presentation you had given earlier in the year, when a few of us asked for further clarification. So thank you for doing that. And now, our incredible administrators and educators have been performing miracles through this pandemic, and so much is being asked of them. Now is certainly not the time to take away anything. We actually need these supplemental funds that you spoke of earlier, and we need a lot of them. We need a lot more than what we've been getting. Our PA and PTA leaders are writing to elected officials, as are we, to demand that support that all schools need and quite frankly have needed for quite some time are going to be coming to us. Like you and I have been speaking about this idea of a school-wide enrichment model, and we know that that's expensive, that outside vendors are going to be necessary, and we even are going to need parents and family members and other members of the public to assist with staffing. And so, you know, like we know that schools don't have enough money right now to just barely do what they're supposed to be doing. So is there anything else that parents, CEC can be doing at this time to support schools?
Goodness, it's such a great question. So first and foremost, and I want to say that as a CEC, you have always done this, it is to develop strong, comfortable discussions with your principals so that they are open and honest and feel that this is not adversarial, but rather collaborative. So that's the first thing, which we are all trying to do. The second thing is, and I think that our elected officials have worked hard in many cases to this as well, and reached out to talk about the concerns about funding, the concerns about register projections, the concerns about how schools are spending money. We are in the last, what I'm calling the last 4 months, God willing, of this huge crisis. And this is a time when schools are thinking about what to do with the money they have. Many schools have had to use a significant amount of money to fund substitute teachers in line with providing the supports. So I think that one of the things that parents and elected officials and CEC members and the community in general is to really talk to schools, because schools are individual, and what one school may need may not be what another school needs. And I think that you have to have a very clear understanding of that. I want to commend our elected officials and our CEC because I know they have written to the chancellor and the mayor and the governor about register projections and the concerns that we have about declining population, and realizing that this may not be the case, but because of the lesser amount of students in schools this year, parents have been very concerned that schools will be less funded and in fact may have to give back some money. So that's something that I know people have written about, and that is something that is still in conversation at the central level. The other thing I would say is, unfortunately, we have very different schools in different places in our district. And I would very much encourage schools to work together and PTAs to work together to meet the needs, because some of our schools have families that are in food crisis, families that have no employment, families that are in real need that way, and other families, thank God, have been able to weather the crisis better. One of the things that I think is, you're going to hear me talk about this later, but that is important, is looking at the social emotional needs of students. And so supporting programs that not only provide social emotional support to kids in the classroom, especially, God willing, when we go back, but also to families as they adjust, because everybody right now is a person of trauma. And so we want to make sure that there is funding and there is work being done with Parent University. You're going to hear me talk about that later. But there is also the fact that what do our schools need to support them in those areas. Lastly, we have a number of schools that have significant numbers of students who come from temporary housing. And these students are most in crisis student. Oftentimes they are, for want of a better word, and it's a horrible word, afflicted, not only with the fact that they have been homeless, but the fact that they are sometimes emotionally traumatized. Sometimes they are children who, because they have been shifted around so much, have not developed a firm foundation in learning. Some of the shelters have had some technological difficulties. So if you can, in working with your schools, please especially target the children who are in temporary housing and make sure their needs are being met, as we are working to do as well.
Thank you so much, Anita.
Antonia, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask 2 questions or am I restricted to just 1?
I'm fine with anything.
Okay. If you could just, I don't know if you need to go back a few slides or if you just remember, there was a slide with a breakdown of the restricted and the unrestricted funds. And I believe it said that only 61% of the restricted funds were released. And then
Yes,
I think it was 30 something percent of the unrestricted funds were released. Could you just explain why that was?
Loretta, I think that's a question that I think if Loretta, if you're on, you should answer, but I'm going to take a stab at it.
All right.
So the schools get a certain percentage of the funds and some percentage of it is actual DOE funds for things like summer school and other programs. And so I think that may be that. Loretta, if you're on, can you please pick this up? Because I don't
Sure.
want to explain it in error.
Okay, great. I believe that you're referring to slide number 6, which talks about the preliminary CE4E plan, and it has on there the discretionary allocation of 214 million at 61%, targeted allocation of 104 million, 30%, and
Right.
then the summer school. Okay, so basically what this slide is stating is that 214 million at 61% was put directly into the school's budget with the funding allocation title of C4E, and that the schools can use that money based off the criteria or the initiatives that Anita spoke about before. The 30%, the targeted allocation, the 104 million, this money is also put into the school's budget, but it's not put in under that C4E allocation. This is targeted money. So this money would go towards pre-K. Remember the slide that Anita talked
Okay.
about? It's on slide number 8. It talked about the ICE integrated co-teaching, the full day pre-K, and then the autism spectrum
Yes.
disorder classroom, the ASD. Those funds are put into the school's budget as well, but under a different funding allocation. And it's supposed to be used or for those students specifically. So it can't be used for any other purpose except for the pre-K program, except for the ICT teaching classrooms or the ASD programs. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so it's not that when it said that it had that in May the state released 61%. That's not, you're not saying that the state only released 61% of the money. It's 61% of the.
It's in 2 buckets.
Okay.
It's in 2 buckets. They release 61% discretionary that the schools
correct.
divide out.
Right.
And they
Mhm.
released so the 30%, I think it is, that 30% that is specifically targeted. So in other words, the best way to think of this is that there is 30% that the school is mandated to use for specific things and 61% that is discretionary based on the specific needs of the school. So it's 91%.
All right, so I'm just making sure that there wasn't anything withheld, I guess.
No,
Okay.
no.
My second question is, what is meant by time on task?
So time on task usually refers to AIS support, pull-out programs, push-in programs, things where additional staff are utilized to support children during and before and after the school day.
Right. And that'll, yeah.
Go ahead, Loretta.
No, that's what I was gonna say, yes,
Yeah.
time on task before and after school. So I see a lot of the money also being placed into possession so that the teachers can sit with the students in a small group setting or on an individual basis to help them.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that specifically?
Mhm.
Is that, are you talking about ICT classes or any
No.
type of the IEP?
No, what we're talking about is I'm going to give you a really hard example, really classic example. So in many schools, there are push-in programs where the AIS person goes into the room while the teacher is there. It's a gen ed class. It might even be an ICT class, but it is not one of the two teachers. It is an additional person who comes in and works with a small group during a lesson. So for example, I'm going to use 172 is a master at this. PS 172 uses every single one of their service providers as push-in personnel. So you can go into, for example, a reading lesson, let's say in a second grade class, and you will see 5 adults in the room, 5 pedagogues in the room, working in small groups, and that funds that kind of support.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Tia, do you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, what percentage of New York City public school funding is the C4E?
So according to what we just read, about 1,400 plus schools get C4E funding. So it's pretty much almost all the schools get C4E funding.
No, I mean, like, what percentage of the budget, the total education budget?
Larita, I'm going to defer that to you. I know
Yeah,
it's in a slide here somewhere.
no, I don't know what the
No, I don't
percentage
think it is.
for the, no, it's for the entire, I can take that back, and Anita, I'll forward the answer to you so that you can
Sure.
share it with the group, okay?
I just, as a
Thank you.
sidebar comment to this, Tia, because you raised something that I think is so interesting. When I was looking at the amounts of money that we're getting in District 15, and it comes out to about $5 million in total, that doesn't seem like a lot of budget to me.
Best, do you have another question or comment?
Let me just look. I had written one down, but it may have been answered. I was just, the money stuff's always can be a little bit confusing to many of us.
Mm,
I guess I was kind of looking, the question's really targeting, you know, how do we kind of hold the DOE accountable as parents if, for example, we have monies designated for the subgroup of to prioritize MLL, students in poverty, students with disabilities, or students who are at risk of not graduating. And, you know, just how do we follow that trail and be an advocate along the way, that it's really happening in those ways? And because it's always a question of how that money gets prioritized, not just prioritized within the subgroup. So I'm curious about that, especially if it's not meant to be to supplant, but be a supplemental monies. So I'm assuming it's a lot
So
less.
Bess, I think that's a really good question. And I think that the answer I'm going to give you is the only one that I would look at. And that would be in your SLT, looking at the CEP, what are we prioritizing? If we have a group of kids, for example, let's do a high school where there are students in danger of not graduating. How are we addressing the needs of those kids? So I can give you an example from one of our high schools. I only have 2, so it's easy. Brooklyn High School for the is working with children who got NX grades at the end of the fall semester. And in order to ensure that they correct those grades and pass those courses, they conducted what they call boot camp over the vacation, so that they supported it. That's one way that you can see that they're providing support for those specific kids. Another thing is, if you have an ASD Nest program, what are the supports that are in place for those children? Are there service providers working with those children? Is there, for example, a space for a calm room, or even a calm corner? Or how are the teachers trained to work with those kids? All of those things, all of these pieces are what is the school doing that targets the needs of those specific children? And remember, it is all struggling children. So for example, the example that I gave about the push-in program, are they doing push-in programs? Are they doing AIS? Is there an after-school program supporting kids in need? Is there a Saturday program? You know, are there vacation boot camps, so to speak? All of those are things that you can ask and talk to your SLT, talk to your principal about. And these are things that should be very openly talked about. It isn't like a secret.
Camille, should we extend the comments and questions period? We have 2 more in the chat room, and we still have 3 more members to call.
That is fine with me, but let's just make sure that everybody's okay with that.
Okay. Yes, we already run out of time for the members.
Could people give a thumbs up if they want to give more time to this segment, please?
That's fine. This is Kimberly. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
This is Claudia as well. Thank you, everyone, for
Claudia? Okay.
thanks for sending the PowerPoint. I'm comfortable with yielding time for now and just sending comments through the email to Superintendent Scott.
I pass. Mark?
Hi, Ivan. I guess I just got a copy of the document, so it's difficult to ask informed questions when we get a copy of the document the day of. But that said, thank you for the presentation. I'm particularly interested in two things. Well, one, it is interesting that you said that the allocation for our district is rather small, and it does sound like a small amount given the overall piece of the pie. And I'm curious as to why that is. Two, you put some class, there's a lot, I love the emphasis on the reduction of class size and the thematic things, but I'm wondering if there's any detail you can add to show how that money works, specifically as it relates to which classes were reduced in which schools. So we actually have the class, like this money was gone to PS whatever, and the class size in 5th grade was reduced from 30 to 25. Because I think that would be helpful to see for us at this level, if there's ability to do that. I'm not sure if you have the ability to do that. And then
Mark,
just as you know, yeah.
I'm going to try and answer you, but I know it's not going to be the answer you want. So the reality is that the reduction of class size tends to happen in needier schools than most of the ones that we have. You have to remember that most of our schools are in good standing and as such are considered not as struggling as other districts which have numerous schools that are considered in more danger. So that's number one. Number two, when we were talking about class size reduction, and I know this is a sore point. I know that this makes it's very incomprehensible. I cannot say to you that at PS 94, we reduced the 3rd grade class from 32 to 27. I can't, because that's not how it works. The reality is what we're being told is that the money enables us to even be at 32 when we might have to be at 34 or 35. That's what I have always been told about this. And Larita, I will defer to you if you want to clarify this.
Nope, I think that you said it all, Anita. There's no way for us to be able to drill it down to a school level. But again, if you look at the slide and you see where the money is going, you take a look at the amount of money that's being applied towards teachers. That's teacher development as well as new teachers that are being brought in, then that would help us to determine that the funds are being used to reduce class size.
I guess the cynical side of me likes to see that it actually works as opposed to thematic. I guess that spiritually it's right that the top line's there, but I have a hard time to see how crowded our classrooms are. And it does sound to me, Anita, and thank you for pointing out your frustration with it also. It does sound like the funding model incentivizes good schools to stack up their classrooms to college-sized classrooms. so struggling schools get the relief they need because they know class size reduction matters. But school districts that do well or schools that do well, there's an incentive to kind of actually balloon these things up, and they don't get the relief. So we do in our district, of course, we do have massive classes, which is antithetical to kind of good elementary schools, which is ironic. I guess it would be helpful, I guess, to prove out that those things are working. It doesn't sound like they're working in our district. It sounds like we've thrown money at the topic, and we still have classes of 35. Just between 35 and 32 is something. Those classes are just too big. But then I guess the big question I have is COVID related, and I don't know if it's C4E funding, but we've talked about this a little bit before. Is our teachers our frontline workers, our staff are frontline workers, our principals are frontline workers, and they are at their breaking point. And you can see it online, you can see it when you talk to them, we can hear it when we hear from them. They deserve hazard pay, not reduction. They deserve they deserve recognition in this moment. Is this the type of money and the pools that we're talking about here that's around retaining talent? And do we have when this thing kind of goes over, we are going to have a crisis of people leaving teaching and leaving administration to do other things where they can get paid. Do we have thoughts on that, Anita? Is this the right pool of money? Is this the right conversation, or is that a different conversation and a different pool of money?
I think it's part of it.
We're actually having the DOE come to us and talking about clawing back money from our school district when we should be giving our people hazard pay.
Mark, nobody more than I is aware of how amazing our teachers and principals are. So I agree with you completely. They are astonishing, and the level of commitment that they have shown has gone above and beyond. And I've talked to you about this, but the level of commitment of our principals, our teachers, the way they care about their kids, the things they've done for their kids is just, it's the stuff of dreams. And I will say this to you, there is part of this money that talks to teacher and principal quality initiatives. It's a very small piece in our district. I don't think that most of the money in C4E goes for teacher retention. I do believe that there is, work being done at the central level in a different focus on teacher retention, on principal retention, even on superintendent retention, because this is a difficult time for many people. And so I'm certainly willing to bring back that concern. I agree with you completely. We all do, that this is, these are people who need to be lauded and appreciated. And I think there is a degree of appreciation, but I also think that we are at such a stress level right now that it is financially and otherwise, that I think that people are just trying really hard to get through it. And I think that once, God willing, the dust settles and we get back to a more normalized existence, then would be a good time to start talking about what are we going to do for our schools in terms of retention even more. Because I agree with you. I think this has been an incredibly hard year, an incredibly hard row for many people to hoe. And I know that we are working very hard in the district to make people feel appreciated and as supported as humanly possible. But I will bring that back for you, Mark. Absolutely.
I appreciate you continuing to do that, Anita. It's very helpful, and I appreciate your efforts in that regard. I do think we need to escalate and think about teacher retention and staff retention now. D15 has some of the best teachers and staff around, mm-hmm. and you know that, and you're the biggest champion of that. But after the pandemic over, maybe too late, we're already seeing people saying, "Hey, I want to quit. I want to be done." And we need to get their back now. We're going to do, as parents, we're going to get their back. As parent leaders, we're going to get their back. The kids are getting their back, but the DOE has to step up and come up with a serious plan to retain this talent. They deserve it. They're heroes in this moment.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Mark. We have two comments on the chat box. We have Tracy Ann. She's asking about a special needs information, summer school, and if there's any support for the special needs kids lacking activities.
So, Tracy Ann, let me start with, we have not heard anything about summer school as yet. This is something that came up actually at our principals conference today as well. And I know that they are thinking about it, and I would venture to guess that of course there will be summer school. I will share any information I have as soon as I get it. In terms of special need activities, could you please explain what you're talking about, Tracy Ann?
We can,
I thought I saw her.
Tracy Ann, there's can we make
I don't see her in the chat anymore, or in
I don't
the
see her in the
listing
chat
anymore.
either.
Yeah.
Can we go to the last comment on the chat box? Are any after-school programs available at this time within the district? When will high school be allowed back in their schools? Do you have any information about that?
Oh my goodness, you're asking the million-dollar questions tonight. I don't know when high schools are being allowed back, but I know that tomorrow morning, the middle school teachers are going back to prepare for the following day when the kids are coming back. So that's a big, wonderful change. I know that if they are looking at the elementaries, I'm sure they'll look, and the middle, they will now start to look at the high school and see when they will be allowed back. We have not heard anything as yet, and I honestly don't know. In terms of after-school programs, I think there are some in the district. They're very school specific. And what I would say to you is, please reach out to your school specifically and see if they do have an after-school program. Some of the after-school programs are in person, and most of those are at elementary level. I think if you have, for example, I almost positive I'm right on this. I believe in one school that is a shared campus between a middle and elementary school, then some of the kids who come in the after school program are middle school kids, but mostly it's for elementary school, where the schools are in place at this point.
Thank you very much, Anita. And next, we're gonna have Camille with the president's report.
So much. So I want to welcome everybody to our February calendar meeting. I am really glad that all of you are with us this evening, and tonight we're going to be welcoming members of the District 15 President's Council, our district parent leaders. We're going to be reviewing a letter about funding from the President's Council and another one from CEC15 to Governor Cuomo. We're working on a draft resolution regarding the same. And now, almost a full year into the pandemic, the devastating impact on our communities is unfortunately becoming more evident in the mental health of our students. The DOE has been sponsoring a multitude of parent and family workshops through the Child Mind Institute. These online sessions have been well attended and are full of very important strategies and supports that can help you and your child during the pandemic, during remote learning, and well into the future. CEC15 is also hosting a health and wellness event this Thursday at 12 p.m. Please join us and share that information with your families. I'm just going to drop this link into the chat. And that has the flyer in it if you want to post that on Facebook and send it to your friends. So we, CEC15, we started our ad hoc committee teams, and hopefully those meetings are going to be starting this week. Still trying to work out the details. So one of our council members, Tia Shellstead, has offered
You're breaking.
lead the team on financial inequities in District 15 participating. We had a few educators sign up and incredibly grateful for that. We'd love a few more and possibly an administrator or two so that we could just have really well-rounded, deep conversations about these issues. So if anybody on the call is interested in participating, just reach out at CEC15@schools.nyc.gov. And as you all know, we were celebrating Black History Month, and there have been tons of resources coming out of the DOE. And our schools have been doing a wonderful job with lessons. Superintendent Scott, I'm sure, is going to be sharing more details later in the district report about district-wide events that we've been sponsoring. And she also said earlier that middle school students are going to be returning to the classroom. These, of course, are the ones who had opted into blended learning. So families, please make sure you have your signed consent form for COVID testing. That has to be submitted ASAP. You can find the form on the DOE website or log into your New York City Schools account. If you don't have a NICSA account, you should contact your parent coordinator as soon as possible. The DOE is going to be using this method for communications soon, and you'll also need to sign into your NICSA account if you want to run for a seat on the Community Education Council or vote in the upcoming elections. So this is an exciting year. All parents are encouraged to vote for your future CEC leaders. Please make every attempt to use your power and your voice through this voting process. As elected parent leaders for District 15, our council term is going to be ending on June 30th, and the new council would begin on July 1st. So if you'd like to run for a seat on CEC 15 or any of the citywide councils, the application period is open only until February 28th, so that's this weekend. Take this opportunity to be a district leader. You can find more information about roles and responsibilities on the DOE website or on our website, cecd15.org. If you'd like to give it a trial run, we have a few seats open on our council right now. And we're going to be sending out an email shortly with more information about how you can apply. So we're in February right now. And as I said, the term ends June 30th. So if you were to be elected to CEC 15 right now, you would be on the council from now only until the end of this school year. You might have already been discussing the CEC elections in your school leadership team meetings or in your PA/PTA meetings. We have a lot of parent leaders in District 15, and I'm sure next year's team is really going to be incredible. This district is making so much progress toward equity, and everyone is really looking out for each other. Speaking of looking out for each other, CEC 15 still has a bit of money in our budget, and we have already slated some of those funds for parent and student workshops. If any of our school leaders have ideas for specific workshops, please reach out to us so that we can try to set up some more support sessions. We want to make sure that our children are being given opportunities to grow and thrive as best they can at this time. It's really so important to see these incredible little people for who they are, full of talent and promise. Many are really struggling, and it's not fair to be pushing them. We really need to make our struggling students our first priority and find every way that we can to make sure they stay the course. If you feel like your child needs extra attention, please reach out to your teacher, principal, or parent coordinator. There are a lot of remediation services at our schools, and many of our schools have access to mental health service providers. No one needs to be suffering at this time. We're all experiencing trauma. Please reach out for help if you need it. The entire world has been adversely affected by the depth of this virus, but we are all here for each other. Superintendent Scott said at the district leadership team meeting this week that we have to be the bringers of hope. And I do believe that if we all continue working together and staying positive, we're going to come out of this stronger. So thank you all. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can move on to the next step in our agenda.
Yes, we got the President's Council tonight. Justin,
Sure.
welcome tonight.
Hi. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for Camille for that great update and for all the conversation. I see a bunch of President's Council folks here, and for those who don't know the context, a couple times a year, President's Council and CEC join up, and this is one of the joint meetings. So we are not going to conduct our normal business. I don't have a as formal and full a report as Camille just did. I will share a couple things that have gone on recently. One is I'm the Secretary of the President's Council. We are actually going to be without a president until we have a new election. So we're looking for a new president for the President's Council. I say that because every President's Council member on the call knows that I am individually tapping them to see if they're interested. This will be obviously through the remainder of the year, and then we'd, in a few months, select someone for the new year. There is precedent to mid-year executive replacements. I joined the executive board of the President's Council mid-year last year, so it can happen. But until then, we're totally fine and functioning, and we're very much in touch with Christine Farrell about process stuff. I'll also say that while we're going to talk about the letter in a moment and about the clawback on budgets, and there's obviously a lot of advocacy going on, we had one of our most highly attended and robust meetings recently, all about like auctions, fundraising, community events, community resiliency, and as much as the advocacy, which is so true to my heart and my work, sometimes seems the core. What really got a lot of folks on the President's Council and other people joining our meeting was the last meeting where people talked about what they're doing for their auctions, what they're doing instead of auctions, what they're doing to account for different financial hardships, how they're building community online, how they're thinking about community in person. And it was really a very full conversation to give you a sense of things we've been working on. Beyond that, I would then open it to other members of the President's Council if they want to share anything that they think the council has been attending to. And then obviously we have the letter. And maybe I would turn to one of the drafters of the letter if they're still on the call to talk through where it came from. The letter about opposing the budgetary clawbacks for the low enrollment numbers. Does anybody else who worked on that letter want to speak to that? And Camille or Antonio, is that like what we can do now? Present that letter? Is that a good time for it, or is there something more
I mean,
formal?
should we do like a little bit of introductions, or, you know, maybe what we could do is, we could do like sort of this round table with the CEC members so they could just say which schools they're representing in case they haven't been able to make contact, because I know a few people have not been able to make contact with their PTA. So that would be fantastic. Then at least we can kind of put a name to the face. Is that okay? So I'm Camille Passaretti. I am representing PS261, and I see they're in the house. Thank you for being here tonight. And IS 136 and MS 821, both middle schools. Antonia, you want to go next?
Sure. I just got a message from Tia saying she's in the waiting room and she can't get in.
No, that's
okay.
yeah.
Anyway, I represent 124, 676, and 32, as well as MS 88.
This is Tia, represent 321, 107, 516, and 130.
This is Bess. I represent 118, 169, 295, MS 443, and now 8:39 and 1:30.
This is Kimberly. I represent 58, 29, and 442, all always very well represented on the call. Unfortunately, I've not been able to reach out to any of the PTAs directly.
This is Claudia. I represent PS 24, 172, and 896.
Well, I can go. This is Mark Bizzard. Hi,
Mark,
everybody.
yes, please.
I liaise with PS 146. I liaise with PS 154, and my new one is MS 51.
I'll go. My schools are PS1. I have also PS94. I have also PS230 and MS497. Those are my schools. Thank you. Welcome to not to all the persons in. Please
Justin, do
reach
you
out to
want
us.
to, sorry,
No, go ahead.
yes, please. All of our emails are actually on our CEC15.org website, so you could reach us there too. Justin, do you want to like sort of do a round table with a round circle with the people you know?
Sure, let's people can pipe up or I'll tap you, but I won't necessarily tap you because if you're on mute, you might have like kids in the background who knows. I'm Justin, I'm from PS39, which also has a parents association meeting tonight, but I'm hanging out with you all instead. I'll throw it over. Let's see who I see next. 261, go ahead, Supriya.
Hi, my 8-year-old just decided to start playing the piano right this second. So hello, I'm Supriya Doshi. I'm from PS261. I'm the president. Very excited to be here. Thanks.
Uh, 58, I see, well, good representation.
Hi, I'm Nagar. I'm one of the co-presidents at PS58 with Molly Rayo.
And I'm Molly Rayo, and I'm one of the co-presidents of PS58 with Nagar Treester. And I'm going to throw it to PS38.
Hi, I'm Jessica Smith from PS38. I'm going to hop off in a couple minutes for our monthly executive board meeting, but happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Jen Cribbs. I'm one of the co-presidents from PS10.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Mary Hune. I'm the president of MS447.
Thank you. Welcome.
I see 130 as well. I don't know if 130 wants to come off mute.
Sorry, the kids are reading books. Hi, I'm Mel, co-president. I'm one of the co-presidents of PS 130.
Thank you.
That may be our full complement.
All right. Welcome, all of you, tonight to our meeting.
And I'm appreciating that pink lemonade is being advertised by 261 right now.
I'm sorry.
No, don't make it. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the kids. Okay, so that, welcome to take any other introductory notes or comments. Otherwise, maybe Nagar or Molly would talk about the letter that PS58 led on.
I am. So I'm happy to start with that. We started this letter about a month ago, and the reason we did it is because, we heard from our principal. I mean, we were shocked when she told us that in this year of all years, our school actually owes money back. I mean, we've been working with our principal from the early days of the summer, and just watching her literally reimagine what the definition of school was. and sitting there as they try to create cohort schedules and try to create a hybrid schedule and really try to create this brand new vision of school and make sure everyone has the technology they need and all the funding they need. And we understand that PS58 is coming from a easier position than maybe other schools in our district, but it's been hard for 58 as well. It's been hard for all of our schools. And so we're writing this letter to really say that this year of all years, it just doesn't make sense to cut schools funding and to say that schools owe money back right now when they've had to take on heroic efforts just to keep people in. And I'm sure everyone else can chime in more, but that's really where our letter is coming from.
Yeah, I'll just kind of piggyback on that, or as my second grader would say, I'd like to add to what Nagar said. We have been in close touch with Brad Lander's office. And again, that was kind of at the recommendation of our principal, trying to figure out what advocacy we could do, how to mobilize our parents, and what was the appropriate way and venue and person kind of to put this issue in front of. And so kind of became this letter, which then became kind of a coalition through the President's Council and Justin's leadership, and kind of spiraled into this very large group of folks who signed on to the letter. And obviously, we wanted to put it in front of the CEC because we know that this is a place for that type of advocacy. And kind of, send it up the chain of command. So we've talked about it a lot at our PTA meetings the past couple of months. We encouraged parents from our school to come tonight if they had questions and concerns about budget related things. And so that's kind of where we are.
I'd like to add that, some of the schools aren't going to be hit hard with this budgeting and giving back until next year, when a lot of the kids aren't going to be in, when their attendance is going to basically be down, the enrollment's going to be down. So next year is going to be even probably worse than this year in terms of giving back. So we might want to add a note to the letter about looking forward to, because first of all, these teachers, like the principals, have been working through the summer since last year, and the teachers have all just, they're just, thank God for the teachers. But I feel like next year is going to be even worse because of lower enrollment. And if there's too much low enrollment, guess who goes? Teachers.
Would anybody on the council like to read the letter aloud for the public?
Sure, let's do it like Passover style, where we each do a paragraph, because it's kind of a longish letter. Not long as letters go, but long for one person to read aloud. So I'll read the first paragraph, and then whoever wants to can read the second paragraph. We, the concerned PA and PTA presidents within Brooklyn School District 15, are writing to bring attention to the dire financial crisis schools across the city, including in our district, are facing this year. The situation is exacerbated by our state government's refusal to give schools their fair share of federal funds, along with the call for schools with COVID-related enrollment loss to owe funds back to the DOE. Go for it, paragraph 2.
Double check.
I'm looking for it. Hang on.
Or I'll take that while Molly could take the third one. The DOE is attempting to reclaim these funds due to decreased enrollment at a time when our COVID-related expenses to running safe schools is skyrocketing, owing the city funds, in some cases, upwards of $600,000 due to temporary enrollment loss, will create a catastrophic downward spiral for our schools. When schools lose critical funding, we also lose the ability to retain our families, resulting in even more funding loss. The current system is untenable, and adding financial stress during a pandemic is simply indefensible.
Our school administrations are taking on heroic efforts to simultaneously fund 2 brand new and completely different school models during this time, hybrid and remote. The costs of running these programs effectively are unprecedented and require a wild reimagining of what the definition of school is. Our city leaders have a mandate to ensure our students are academically and emotionally supported, engaged, and educated during this time of crisis. Schools need additional technology, additional staff, and additional resources to meet the logistical and emotional strains brought on by the pandemic. To accomplish this, our schools need an increase in funding, not cuts.
I'll go. We are calling on our city and state leaders to create a new model for funding and to adopt provisions to hold schools harmless for any drops in enrollment, especially during the pandemic. This is where we should end next year. We are also calling on our state government to give schools their fair share of federal funds. Last year, our government cut school funding by the same $1.1 billion that the federal government granted. Somebody else?
We'll go backwards like a snake. I'll do the next one. Our children are living through a once-in-a-century pandemic. Many of them have lost close family members and friends to this virus. Many others have family members that have lost their jobs and income. This is not the time to have them suffer additional cuts in their schools as well.
Some of our schools are facing this crisis of owing funds. Other schools do not, but we are standing in solidarity with all schools, parents, and educators across the district. This issue affects schools in all neighborhoods with larger and smaller student bodies across most zip codes in our city. We are all coming together and saying no to these outrageous moves, no to further cuts, and yes to investment to make sure all of our schools have the critical funding they need in this time of crisis. And you can see the list there of all the schools that have signed on.
Thank you so much for reading that. Do you mind if I jump in and read? We have been collecting a list of the monies that are owed back to the state, and if you don't mind, I'd like to read some of the some of the numbers that are being owed. Is that all right if I read that, Camille? Camille? I don't hear.
Absolutely, open conversation.
Oh, okay. So according to our list, PS10 owes $247,972. PS29 owes $413,000. PS58 owes approximately $600,000. 107 owes $218,000. 118 owes $220,000. 172 owes $27,000. 261 owes $271,000. 321 owes $503,474. And PS516 owes $125,000. And 896 owes $90,593. I don't know, there may be more out there, though. That was all we were able to collect. But we certainly would like to know the total scope of the problem. If more of your presidents have that information, we'd like to have it. Should we turn this over to a vote or comments from the public on the letter? All right. Yvonne, do you want to manage
Yes.
public comments on the
All
letter?
right. Sure. So far on the letter, well, we have comments from Claudia concerning that. I feel that my liaison schools aren't being represented in your group, not for any lack of effort or on your part, I'm sure, but it seems like there's a lot of good information or resources that could benefit from that or discuss. I'd be happy to try to coordinate information PS 24, 172, and 896. I think we're looking for more ways to make other PTAs in other schools get in touch with you and to be part of the council.
Justin, do you want to drop the District 15 President's Council email in the chat? And then that way, if somebody's not on our listserv, we can add them.
We can use that for the schools.
I know it's tough. We've all got, obviously represented on this call, 15 other meetings that we all could be attending, but I think they've worked really hard this year to try to widen the net, and that would be, our discussions would be even better the more diverse the group of schools that we pull from.
I believe 896 did sign on to the letter. No?
Well, if no one else is going to comment, I will comment. Thank you for the amazing work. I've actually read the letter 3 times because I think it's so well done. It is fantastic effort. I know you guys are doing this as a volunteer gig. I used to sit in the President's Council for a year with you, and I've seen kind of you guys make the magic happen. And I know you're doing this late at night, but to put together such a well-constructed idea and to kind of go to bat for your schools is an amazing, inspiring thing. And so whatever we can do, or whatever I can do to sign up in solidarity, if I can sign the thing, I'll sign it. If we can do it as a council, I'll approve whatever we resolve to do tonight. But much needed work, and sad to say it, but it's parents doing it. It's not elected officials. It's not anybody else, but it's you guys, the parent leaders who are stepping up and doing this. And it means a lot to other parents in these schools that you're doing it. So thank you very much. And I'm excited to sign this thing. This is one of the better ones I've signed up for that I've seen in a while this year. So thank you. It's inspiring.
Thank you, Mark. We got a question from Johanna. Johanna, are you?
Yep, I'm here. I'm muted. I have a question. I'm a parent of 464, MS 464, which I'm not even sure if that counts as, I don't know how it works with District 15 anymore, middle schools. But I know that about before, maybe a year and a half ago, there was a fair student funding task force that had come together to look at fair student funding, and they were supposed to put together a final report where they were looking at just all of the problems that are caused by the inequities around fair student funding. And I'm wondering, I think it's just a little bit tangential to this letter, but I'm wondering, I think that the issues and citywide battle around inequities caused by headcount based funding has been longstanding. And I hope that this letter is going to not just focus on and will spur interest in finding out whatever happened to that task force, which was city council. It was a city council mandate. I think it was actually required by law, and I don't think that they ever produced their final report. But I think it's overdue, and I think that what we're seeing this year around the adherence to still maintaining fair student funding as a formula for funding schools is like there's never been more of a time to find out what their recommendations were and how to go forward.
We also have a question from Claudia.
Thanks, Yvonne. And this is just for my own clarity, and maybe this is more directed at Superintendent Scott. Camille, and I'm sorry, I can't find the link that you sent. There was a YouTube video that you'd sent out, a recording from a meeting maybe about a month ago this was asked to the chancellor, and he had an explanation for how and why the rationale for the money being for the readjustment on the budgets, but I couldn't quite understand the rationale for it. I don't know if you're able to provide any insight of like what the stance is from the DOE, like on the rationale for pulling this money. And specifically, I think Chancellor Carranza's comment had been around like if if these funds aren't recollected or collected from these schools, and it's actually the more disenfranchised or marginalized schools like Title I schools specifically that would be most to suffer if these funds weren't returned by the general school population. But I couldn't quite understand that. I don't know if you can provide clarity on that.
Anita, so what
can
Claudia is talking about is there was a meeting with the chancellor speaking to CEC members through the ECC. And he didn't do an exceptional job of detailing how.
Agree, yeah, it was vague.
And I think it caused a lot of confusion and upset. So, you know, if you could just speak to what happens every year as a regular rule and
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some history, some backstory, because that I can explain. And then I'm going to attempt to explain, I think, and I'm not sure. And again, it's always me, but I'm going to try. So first and foremost is that historically, every year schools are asked to they're sent what are called register projections. Register projections. What does that mean? It means that for the coming school year, based on what has historically been your population, this is what we are projecting that your student population will be next year. The principals at that point review the register projection. They say, yes, this is pretty much accurate, or no, I want you to know that this year we went up 50 kids or we went down 50 kids, or usually it's fine within a range unless there's something wonky. But for the most part, because it's historically in line with the students they've had, it is not hugely the numbers that you're talking about right now. What has happened this year is because, and then, well, let me backtrack and just say, and the funding is aligned to those register projections. When we talked about fair student funding, and I'm not going to redo the presentation, when we talked about fair student funding, we talked about how there is a per capita funding. So the number of students that you have directly impacts the amount of money that you get. That's the way it's done. Okay, so let's say you're getting X number of dollars, you have 100 kids. That's the way it works. This year, the historical projections don't work because what has happened is that the alignment is inaccurate. What happens is that they usually go by what is called, and Mark knows this, having been in the school, the October 31st register. They align it to the October 31st register. They say, we projected that you would have 100 kids. October 31st, you have 105 kids. You went up 5 kids. Or we projected that you would have 100 kids. October 31st, you have 87 kids. You went down 13 kids. If you went down 13 kids, you owe us X number of dollars from what we gave you. If you went up 5 kids, we owe you 5 kids worth of money. That's how this works. Usually what happens is if the DOE owes a school money, the money comes in around February, that extra money. But if the school owes the DOE money that has been laid out, then they have to put it aside and ultimately it will be taken back. So that's how this works. That's why October 31st is so important. This year, they waited until November 13th because of the pandemic. But many, many of our schools lost children where parents move to different areas and put their kids in different schools in those areas, those more rural areas, different states. And where we're seeing, ironically, the greatest declines are in the schools where we have parents who have the financial viability to move to different areas. That's what we're seeing. So if you look at the list of kids that was read, the list of schools that was read, these are very populous schools. One of the concerns that's being raised is, yes, the parents move their kids out for this year, but chances are they'll be back in September. That's very plausible. It doesn't mean it's going to completely happen, but it is plausible. That is what's causing this deficit. The alignment is not aligned to the historical things. So a school, let's say a school like, I'm going to use 321 because it's the one that I know the numbers on. 321 has 1,400 kids. And now they have 200, 300 kids less. So the expectation is they owe this huge chunk of money because their projection as of November 13th is significantly, their actual as of November 13th is significantly lower than their projection. That's what the issue is. I think what the chancellor was trying to say, Camille, and I'm not sure, is that it's like moving money from one pocket to another. That if you have overprojected certain schools and they have all this extra money that we now need because we're in a financial crisis, then how are we able to give it to the schools where they have not lost kids and in fact have gained kids? That's what I think he's talking about, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that the miscommunication, and like I keep thinking about this over and over and over again because there was some language that he used, which is what I believe caused all of this confusion. He was referring to the schools that were in the plus, in the positive, like in the black right now, as schools of privilege, meaning like they had money still left in their budget. And, you know, like what we might normally consider a school of privilege, in these cases happen to be in the red. And so I had added up all of the student loss in all of District 15 schools, then kind of divided by the total number of schools. Like, I know this is not really how it works, but if we did like reallocate the funds, that came out to something less than 30 students per school as a loss. And I think that like pretty much any school at this point in time could survive a 30 student loss, but I could be wrong. And so that was what I was trying to understand. Is this actually how it's going to work? Like the schools that are in the black will return their funds and the schools that are in the red will receive those funds, or that's not happening? Because that kind of sounds like what's fair in the whole scenario, but I don't know.
So here's the thing. I can use two schools as an example that I know of that are actual examples. So we are all familiar with the fact that PS 124 has the homeless shelter that opened and that is filling with students. And they have had a register increase of approximately 50 kids because of the shelter. That school was underfunded because they previously were 50 kids lower. So they're a school that had to be given more money, 50 kids worth of more money. Again, back to 321. 321 is a school that had X number of kids and now has X minus, let's say, 100 kids. So they were given the money for the X amount of kids, but they now owe the DOE 100 kids worth. All of our schools strive to be very financially and fiscally responsible. So many of the principals are now looking at the money that they have and saying, well, if they're going to take back X number of dollars, then this is money I can't spend and that I won't have. So they have to put it in what's called a set aside to make, it's like putting it in the bank to pay the rent. It's like putting it aside because you know it's going to go bye-bye. It's like income tax money. You know, you're not getting a refund, that you're going to have to pay it. So you put an account aside. That's what's happening. I think I did not hear the chancellor's speech and I apologize, but truthfully, I'm a little confused about in the red, in the black here. What I think about is that there are schools that got an increase in kids and they are going to have to get extra funding. And I don't know if what he was saying was, we need the money from the schools that were overpaid to pay the schools that now need to be given extra money.
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, and that's how I was confused too. That's how I interpreted too, that he was saying that, you know, the schools that were owed this money would be hurt by the non-payment. And obviously, like, so my stance, just to even state it, like, is I don't think any of these schools, especially in this period, should have to owe back. I just wanted to understand like what that really meant, because it was very confusing statements. And at least from my experience, like most of the schools that I liaison with, and even where my children are at, they're unfortunately used to these level of, you know, mid-year budget adjustments. So like you said, they tend to be more fiscally responsive or like conservative on that and set aside this money. But the numbers that we're seeing from some of these schools is just really substantial that I can't imagine like how you'd be able to be responsible to allocate or to appropriate for that moving forward.
I think, Claudia, I completely agree with you. And I think that this is at such a level. I'm not a financial maven. Anybody who knows me knows that. This is what I will say. It's Mark said it, our schools need money. We're in a situation, we're in a crisis. And I know that people are saying our city is in a catastrophic crisis. And I get that. I get that money is a huge commodity. So all I can say to you is that I think it's a well-written letter. I think you have every right to send it forward. I think we'll have to wait and see what happens. I just don't know. But these are huge amounts of money. And my concern as superintendent is that what if the kids do come back? In other words, if you've said that they're going to owe $500,000 and then kids come back, I guess you could say, well, then they won't take the money. But if you're saying that they need the money to pay back the money, then what happens for the schools that need? I'm very confused by this. So I think that this is seriously a big concern. I think, I hope that this reaches the highest levels, to be honest, in Washington, and that it is not just about opening schools, but also about funding them in the pandemic.
Are we gonna, then the next is to vote?
Do you want to let, somebody just wrote into the chat, they're from Comptroller Stringer's office. And I'm wondering if we might want to open their mic and let them make a comment.
And it's also, Lara Lay also wrote message before. Is anybody available?
So,
Karaguchi?
yeah, they can unmute themselves. Taika Haraguchi.
Sure. Hey, everyone. This is Taika Haraguchi from New York City Comptroller Stringer's office. It's good to be here tonight with CEC15. I just wanted to just let folks know that, we've been hearing about this issue in regards to under enrollment, not just in Brooklyn, but throughout the city. It was first flagged to us by PS9 in Prospect Heights. And not only are they suffering, severe under enrollment due to the pandemic, they also, are upfront paying an extra $20,000 in order to accommodate the DOE's hybrid learning plan. So they are hiring extra substitute teachers to make sure they're, capping the number of students in both remote and in-person classes. So we know that this is, so we know that this is a citywide issue. We wrote a letter to the DOE about a month ago. So I just want to drop the letter in the chat for everyone's reference. We are, continuing to talk with schools, and we do hope to amplify this issue moving forward. And in our letter, we have a few solutions outlined for the DOE to pursue. One of them does include granting amnesty for schools. And there is a recent precedent for this. They did do this following the Great Recession in 2008, in 2013, when schools had difficulty paying back what they were owed as defined by the DOE. So, my email's in there, and if you continue to work and amplify or want to alert press to this, please do let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving to vote the next item on the agenda. Or Ms. Lara Lay is still on the call?
Hi, I'm here. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here, and thank you so much for addressing this issue so eloquently and so thoroughly. I dropped the letter. It's the third letter, actually, that Brad has coordinated from the City Council, two of which were also signed by Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, calling on the Chancellor and the Mayor to address this issue. I want to reiterate what Taika just said. We have some data in this most recent letter that I put in the chat. If you take a look at it, you can see that we highlight, and this is based on enrollment statistics that were published in Chalkbeat for schools across the entire city. We have a table and look at community school districts, for example, District 5, which is Harlem. 83% of the students there are homeless or receive free and reduced lunch. And the percent of schools based on that data set with enrollment declines was 89% of the schools in that district suffered some kind of enrollment decline. 44% of those schools suffered a double-digit enrollment decline. And we have data for school districts that represent neighborhoods like Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, East New York, Bushwick, that show similar trends, which would suggest it's not a problem strictly for districts like District 15, but it's a problem that schools across the city are facing, which with such high levels of double-digit enrollment declines. So our most recent letter that went to the Chancellor today was requesting that at the upcoming Education Committee budget hearing, that the DOE provide a number of data points that really break down and disaggregate the information on where we're seeing these declines, what's the average number of declines in per pupil funding that schools across the city are seeing, so we can really understand the magnitude of the problem. And also so we can understand if the governor does actually allow federal funds to flow into the city in the way that they should based on the new stimulus package, whether that could be helpful in helping these schools with their budget deficits without it being an issue of equity, as the chancellor suggested in that meeting.
Thank you.
I just want to ask from the representatives from the elected officials if there's any conversation about changing the nature of per pupil funding.
I can comment first. Not that we're aware of. We sent this letter about a month ago, and we gave them a deadline that has since passed. So we have not heard back from the DOE, even just regards to, this under enrollment issue that is pressing. So we haven't heard anything in regards to changing the actual allocation of funds and how they do that.
Thank you.
The same.
Thank you.
I think our suggestion has been we need to invest some time in really discussing what can be done moving forward, but nothing substantive at this point.
Right.
All right. Next, are we ready to?
I think
No.
so.
Okay.
I'll move to support the letter, to support CEC15 signing on to this letter from the President's Council.
I'll second the motion.
Camille?
Yeah, saying I'll second the motion.
Sonia already did. Tia?
I vote yes.
Bess?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
Claudia?
Yes, vote to approve.
Myself, I approve. Mark?
Yes.
All right. So it's unanimous. Thank you very much for participating with this section of our meeting. Now we're gonna move to.
Maybe, sorry, Yvonne, just because there's a comment
Sure.
in the chat, and I think this is also then just helpful for our elected representatives on this call. NV Randall posted a comment. I don't know if we want to at least comment on it.
And okay, still on the call.
It's somewhat related, but I don't know if we want to include it as part of this conversation.
You may as well read it.
Okay.
Yvonne, you
Sure.
Yvonne, go.
There has been a campaign in the past few months to create a new tax structure that will increase taxes among the wealthy to increase funds for education. Is there interest among members of CEC15 for the Invest in Our New York bill package that proposes 6 tax bills, 2 of them specific to raising funds for education, that will incrementally increase taxes on those earnings above a certain amount?
So I am not familiar with this particular website. I'd have to look into it, but we are about to vote on a letter to Cuomo asking him to find new sources of revenue. So when we vote on that letter, you'll have your answer.
Additionally, I have a resolution in draft, and it mentions a bunch of bills that are about taxing the rich, so to speak. So I'll cross-reference what you just dropped there with what's in the draft. Thank you.
Okay. All
And we have already sent a letter to Chromo to that effect. But yes, I'm definitely interested.
It's true, we did send that letter. But thank you for sharing that, those bills with us. We will certainly take a look at them.
All right. So next we're gonna have Anita with the report.
Okay, I am delighted. I will be very brief because you must be tired of hearing from me all night. Very quickly. Next slide, please. Good evening again. So I'm going to go through things very quickly. Again, please. So many of you are aware that last week we were stunned somewhat to find that the state had made an announcement saying that no, in fact, students could not be forced to be COVID tested, and therefore they did not have to consent to testing. This was immediately addressed at the DOE level, and in fact, the DOE's mandated consent form policy is in effect and has been agreed to by the state. This means that any child who is in a blended learning model must have a consent form, as they are doing the weekly testing of 20% of the population minimally. For schools in grades 6 to 8, please note that there is an expectation that parents will be providing this form. As Camille had said, it's available online, but it's also available in paper format, so that when the kids come back to school, they will be available for testing immediately. So consent forms is a yes. Next one. This has come up repeatedly. I was informed by the chancellor and the mayor's office that students cannot be moved from blended to remote learning at this time. We have no information as to whether there will be another window to move students, as the mayor has said he might revisit this as a later date. I know that a lot of parents are looking now to move into blended now that we have vaccines and teachers who are vaccinated. But at this point in time, there is not a fixed protocol, nor is there a revisionist move for a later date. We are hoping that there will be. Next one. Of course, tomorrow, as I said, teachers are returning to schools at the middle school level to prepare for students who will be returning at on the 25th, which is Thursday. These are students who are already in blended learning. They must be blended students. They must have testing consent forms, and the schools must clearly communicate the changes to families. Also, we are still following mask and social distancing rules. Gifted and talented. So this is a whole different procedure this year, as you are very well aware. The expectation was that gifted and talented testing, especially for the little ones, would occur for this last year, and then there would be a revision next year. What has happened is that the call for testing was voted down at the, and so the chancellor's office, in collaboration with the mayor, has come up with a different protocol. This protocol involves an inventory and assessment, that not a test, but a teacher survey that will be filled out by pre-K students whose families wish them to be put into a randomized lottery for a G&T seat. So they will be in a pre-K, if they're in a pre-K setting, whether public or private, they will the teacher will complete a questionnaire to determine if the child is eligible. And then if the child is eligible, they will enter into a randomized lottery for a G&T seat. Siblings of students with G&T programs will have a priority for admission, consistent with previous policy. If a child is not enrolled in a current pre-K for all program, parents are encouraged to sign up for a seat.
Ida?
Am I the only? Okay, good. I thought it was me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're disconnected.
Hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me go back to this. So if your child is in a pre-K program, the teacher will fill out a questionnaire to determine if the child is eligible to enter a random lottery for a G&T seat. The policy has always been that siblings of students in schools with G&T programs have priority for admission, consistent with previous policies. If the child is not enrolled in a pre-K program, they have the opportunity to sign up for a seat now. And if they enroll, their new program will complete the questionnaire based on a short remote interview. If the parent does not sign up for a pre-K, then the DOE's early childhood team will complete the questionnaire based on a short remote interview. And beginning mid-May, all eligible families will receive notification and then enter into the lottery. Families will receive offers this summer ahead of the fall of 2021. For those schools that have seats in grades 1 to 3, those children will come off of last year's wait list in the rank order that they are on the wait list. So that's how that's going to work for those kids. I want to, if you could please go to the next slide. One of the reasons that there is such a concern about G&T is if you look at our data across the city, every year on average, there are combined 2,500 kindergarten seats for G&T out of 15,000 applicants, with 65K rising kindergartners across the city, with 65,000 rising kindergartners across the city. The demographics of kindergarten G&T programs compared to all kindergarten can be found below. So in New York City, 40% of the children who are kindergartners, incoming kindergartners, are Hispanic, 20% are white, and 20% are Asian, 17% are Black, and 4% are others. The children in the G&T program, 43% are Asian and 36% are white. So these programs are considered somewhat segregated, and they are of concern. And superintendents have been talking, our district has been talking, that this is a multi-pronged situation that does not reflect the integration of our city, nor does it meet the needs of all of our children. And I do want to say this categorically, that true giftedness is rare, and that these classes oftentimes are simply kids who are more verbal and have had more experiential language rather than just being truly considered gifted. And all of our kids have so much to offer, and exposed to enrichment would do really, really well. So this is the reason that this is such a concern. Please go to the next slide. I had pulled some questions that Camille had sent me, and this was one of them. So we were asked about the Chancellor's 6-point program, and these are the 6 foci that are the focus of the Chancellor's looking at to improve student achievement in 2021. Getting a baseline on what ground we lost, often called learning loss. So the plan is to use formative diagnostic assessments to determine student needs and strengths. There is discussion going on at Central into using a specific baseline citywide. Again, this is not designed to work as a high stakes test, but to be a screener that tells teachers where kids are struggling. The second point is increasing high quality digital curriculum available for every school. And the city has surveyed schools and asked them to ensure that all content areas have digital supports as well. And the city has provided funding through the core curriculum for the purchase of these curriculums. So all schools have content area curriculum that is digital to help students. They are launching a one-stop digital learning hub. We have Teach Hub and we have the Info Hub. And there is talk of putting together a one-stop shopping digital place where parents and teachers can go on and support kids. Deepening professional development. Again, this will happen over the summer and into the following year. Many of you are familiar with Parent University. They are expanding it, and it is very successful with FACE to include televised and digital opportunities for parents for learning. And lastly, confronting the trauma and mental health crisis faced by our students. We in District 15 are going to be part of a pilot doing what is called GSSI, which is in fact talking about grief support across several of our schools. I think we have 6 schools that are going to be involved in this. So these are things that they're looking into as well. Next one, please. So some of the questions, the purple are the questions that were asked. How are academics going to be assessed if the New York State tests don't happen? What alternate assessments will be used? And so the answer to that is schools have always been using a range of rubrics and diagnostic, formative, periodic assessments, and these are still in use. Some schools are using iReady as diagnostic and not high stakes. There are many different platforms for using as assessment. Some schools are using writing samples, using the Teachers College rubric. Others are using Fontes and Pinnell. Others are using Eureka Math unit assessments. There are many opportunities for formative assessments. It is not something that is dependent on New York State tests. However, there is inconsistency from one to the other. And this is something that the DOE is looking at in terms of putting together, as I said before, one baseline assessment that would enable us to see where kids are across the board. It should be noted that New York City has applied for a waiver from testing this year. However, yesterday, there were comments from the federal government, from the president, that there should be testing. And so we will be waiting to see how this is handled, to be continued. A question was raised about when are the next trainings and anti-bias training for council members and AAs. I would suggest that you reach out to Paul Forbes, the executive director of OEA. He's excellent and he'll be happy to discuss setting up trainings. There were trainings originally scheduled for December and they are now scheduling more. The next one will take a little explaining, and this talks about hiring teachers. So hiring usually, again, a historic precedent, hiring usually occurs throughout the year. If there is funding and there is a need at a school, principals can hire throughout the year. In general, most principals are fully staffed by the beginning of the year, and they will look to hire people in the late spring, early summer for the following year. They use a system called Open Hire. Principals can list openings and teachers can look for positions. That is the norm. In certain instances, and it has happened during the pandemic, there are hiring freezes where the DOE limits the hiring capacity to an individual who already has this position and license, but is in excess as opposed to an external individual. So what am I talking about here? When teachers go on Open Hire, when principals go on Open Hire to see who's interested in a position, they can hire from outside the system. They can hire somebody who has the right license, and basically they're bringing them in to teach brand new to the school. Or they can bring them in if they're coming from another state, or they can bring them in if they're coming from elsewhere. However, when there is a hiring freeze, they can only hire somebody who is listed as in excess. And one of the places this has happened a lot is for teachers with common branch licenses, because these are very, pardon the pun, teachers who have a license that is common across the board. There are many teachers who have common branch licenses. These are teachers who have license to teach 1 to grade 6. That area is and has frequently been frozen in order to ensure that the teachers who are already in the system have first priority at the positions. This same concept is often used for other titles, and I'll get to that in a minute. Special education teachers or ENL teachers are rarely, if ever, frozen because they are like gold. It is impossible to get them, and they are never frozen. But for example, during this pandemic, many titles were frozen. So for example, parent coordinators were frozen, school secretaries were frozen. So one of our schools, 516, was a school that lost its secretary and lost its parent coordinators. And it took us a considerable amount of time to lobby and to ensure that they were able to hire from outside the system, because they were looking for somebody who was bilingual and they were looking for somebody who had strong skills. They interviewed everybody who was in excess. And oftentimes the person who is in excess, for example, only wants to teach in one specific place. It doesn't want to travel too far. Or maybe they've already found a position, or maybe they're not interested in being in a specific district or want to be in a specific district. So that causes difficulty. In order to get an exception in those cases, and this is exactly what happened at 516, the principal interviewed everybody on the excess list, provided documentation to show that, and ultimately we were able to enable them to get an exception to hire both a secretary and to hire a parent coordinator. So that's how hiring works. Next question, next slide, please. Okay, I am happy to answer any additional questions.
Yvonne, you're on mute still.
Sorry, thank you. We're gonna check out for questions, and I have Mel. She's asking, how long will the families have to apply?
That's for G&T.
Oh, thank you. So the families will probably have 6 to 8 weeks to apply to the program.
Very good. Thank you, Claudia. Any questions from the members?
Is the teacher selecting from kindergartners or pre-Kers?
Pre-K.
Pre-K. Okay, thank you.
Mark, Claudia?
Just the on that question, they said there's gonna be a video interview.
A remote interview, yeah.
And will that account for families that are having difficulty with technologies who, or you know, can they do it by phone? Or are there alternatives for people who are already having trouble getting Wi-Fi and computers too?
I am sure that they're I would say those families can go through the office, specifically for the Office of Early Childhood, but I am going to raise that, Marcus. It's a really good point.
Yeah,
just to be sure.
Population
yeah.
In your graphic also. And just two things. I think you were here last week when we talked a little bit about with the facilities folks. I raised the point about seeing vendors and contractors on sites that have no masks on, since this is the return to school. Justin, I'm glad your folks are here. Because what I was told at that time, and one of my points was I really don't want parents policing big burly contractors and telling them to get masks on because our kids are trying to get back to school. And we were given an email address, I think at that time, that I think we can give you, Justin, that you can give your other parents if you see those things. I will tell you, Anita, the folks on the call last week said, "Oh, that's not happening." I've seen it twice this week in the school next door to me. I've seen contractors walking in and out of the school without masks on. The school is out
Mark,
of session.
please send me the information because I will escalate it to the borough safety and they will follow up.
Thank you.
With
I appreciate it.
facilities.
And
Absolutely.
just the last note on the opt-out piece. I understand that with the president's comments yesterday, there is a strong possibility we may have state standardized testing again, and there is a possibility that might happen. I'm interested in what the chancellor is going to do and what our district's going to do to make sure that our parents know of their rights to opt out, and when that process is going to get kicked in. I know I'm seeing a lot of advocates online. Integrate New York today had a nice event with kids driving that we're talking about opting out. But there's a complaint that the chancellor's really not kind of speaking to people's right to opt out of the high stakes test. This year of all years, our family should not be having to be subjected to 3 days of state testing. And I'm sure we can talk about it as a CC, but do you know yet what the DOE's plans are to make sure our parents know that they have a right to opt out if this unfortunate kind of thing would happen to us again?
So first and foremost, what I read, and it's a very small piece, is that the assessment is not supposed to count for anything. It's not supposed to be high stakes. It's supposed to be diagnostic in the sense that it's not going to count for anything. My concern is that it has not been defined as yet. And I think once we get a definition, what I read also is that it can be delayed. So I'm wondering if they're going to say, we're going to wait until the kids come back in September and then do a baseline and count that. I just don't know enough yet. As soon as we get more information, I can follow up. In terms of opting out, Mark, I'm happy to bring this back to the office. I don't know what they're planning to do. I think there's not enough information out there at the state level and at our level for me to really give you a definitive answer.
Thank you, Anita. Claudia, you had a question? I'm just looking at a members at my screen.
Yeah, no, just again, thank you. I put in the chat, but just to publicly thank you again, Superintendent Scott, for all that advocacy work. It really has been a long, tedious several months of not having both the secretary and parent coordinator role that have really had an impact on the heroics of the administration and teachers that filled in those roles.
Incredible.
And just to highlight, I think that was also important for you to include that table of, representation and demographics of our school makeup citywide, and then the GNT representation within that. So just really important to highlight. And I think we've discussed it in previous CEC meetings of just the inequities and lack of representation or adequate representation in these types of programs. So the focus on it being not serving all of the student population that it should be. So that was helpful. That's just comments that I have. Thank you for highlighting those in your presentation.
Antonia?
No, I just want to let the public know that we will send out all of these presentations because somebody in the chat was looking for the presentation.
Yeah, I think Mel was asking for the slide that we have. Camille?
I'm gonna take a pass. I have a lot of access to Anita on a regular basis.
All right, thank you.
Questions or mine, thanks.
Thank you, Camille.
I don't have any additional questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Bess. Kimberly?
I do have one question, Anita. Thank you very much for the presentation. When you talk about a sort of a interview of a pre-K student by their teacher, what kinds of questions, or do we have any sense of the guidance that these teachers will
be using to identify whether that child should be part of a lottery or not. I don't know, it just feels kind of random, and I'm sure it's not, but I am curious as to what the metrics are, or, you know, is there some procedure that they're following, or some study that they're using? Any insight on that would be helpful.
So you're asking the questions that I'm asking, Kimberly. It's a questionnaire. That's all I've heard so far. I have not seen it. I have not seen the rubric that goes with it. Like everybody else, I'm a little concerned about it. I want to make sure, and I've already spoken to my principals about this today, that we are reflecting all of our children whose parents have an interest in this, that it is not just those parents who are pressuring. I also want teachers to reach out to parents if they have not expressed an interest, but they have a child in their class who they feel is a kid who might be a good choice for this. They should certainly reach out to the parent. But having said all of that, ultimately, any assessment of a 4-year-old has to be somewhat subjective. And that's concerning. And ultimately, I guess because it is going to be a lottery anyway, I'm curious to see how this shakes out. But the more information I get, the happier I am to share it with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Tia?
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to follow up on what Mark said about the testing. Just that I think it was 2 years ago, the city sent out a very misleading letter about opting out. I can't remember the exact wording, but I think that it said that there was no provision in the law for parents to opt out, which actually is technically true, that the law doesn't recognize opting out, but that doesn't mean that you can't opt out, and that you don't have a right to opt out. So, and I think Brad Lander actually brought up that particular letter in the city council, and asked the DOE to correct that information, which the DOE never did do. So I would like to be on top of it this year, and make sure that no communication goes out like that. Again, there's really not any excuse, and I would appreciate, yeah, if you could bring that to the DOE's attention, that we are watching, and we will notice, and we will, you know, definitely make noise about it if it happens again.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring that back. As you know, that's not, the letter is certainly not my decision, but I will absolutely raise it to the executive superintendent and to Central.
Thank you, Anita. We had also a question that came in our sign-in sheet, and is related to COVID-19 impact on mental health of our youth and their families. And also, if you happen to know that, are there any cases of suicide in the district of our youth?
Thank you, God. I can tell you the statistics, but thank God it's not in our district. Unfortunately, there was a newspaper article that discussed last year overall, there was a total of 4 student suicides across the year. This year, between January and recently, or maybe the school year, I don't want to say less, maybe it's in September, there have already been 5. And so, in fact, our principals today at our principals meeting, we had a presentation on prevention of suicide in schools, but thank you, God. No, we don't have any. We're very grateful. Our schools are doing a yeoman's job of reaching out to kids and supporting kids, and we are trying very, very hard to meet their social emotional needs. And we have prioritized that as a district. And we have mindfulness, we have yoga, we have a lot of work that's being done around that, social emotional supports as a district, various programs. We are, as I said before, we are going to be piloting a program on grief because it is an important means of supporting kids who are feeling the trauma deeply, and we want to make sure that schools are well trained in that. All of these pieces, but especially the human interaction that our principals have supported at that schools. We are very grateful for that. And I do believe that that has made a huge difference.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you very much for all your questions and comments. And we're gonna go on over, let me make the last check on the chat box. I think we're just gonna move to old business.
Camille?
I'm sorry, my computer keeps cutting out and I was trying to put some other things here in the chat. Two links, they're kind of like one on top of each other. So, wait, the link. Okay, so first link was off the DOE website for various supports for families if they've had a traumatic event. And completely non-related is like another opt-out website for people to just look at what the New York State, that's the Union for Teachers, Facts for Parents and Opting Out of State Tests. The only new business that I have is one, talking about our open seats on the CEC, and just anyone on the call, please do spread the word that we have these few seats open that we'd really love to fill. Right now, we're looking at voting on a rezoning towards the end of our term, and it would be great if we had full council so that we have a lot of representation from all over the district. We are still seeking a representative for our English language learner seat, and that is really important. It's always a difficult seat to fill. And, I know COVID is making it even harder. This is super important. And I guess there's only really 3+ months left of this term. So please do spread the word. And I discussed about the ad hoc committees earlier, so that feels like it's moving in the right direction. Really happy about that. Anybody else? New business? I mean, old business? Okay, so then, and Anita, thank you again. Super lucky to have you as our superintendent, and thank you for all that you do for the district. And I see all of her team on the call too. Christine, and I think I saw Fran earlier, and Brenda, were you there too? My screen's jumping all over the place. And thank you to our dedicated principals coming on this call too. Should we just continue on with the agenda?
Yeah. Yeah, could I just point out that Nancy Corona from Carlos Menchaca's office had been here, and she just wanted to give everybody the website to submit requests for ResOA capital funding. It's a form. I will put it in the chat for everybody. She had put it in the chat, but I will add it. She had to leave.
Okay.
Oh, Antonia, I think you just sent it to me.
I just sent it to you by, okay, I will do that again. Whoops. There we go. Now everybody should have it.
Thank you.
Camille, do you want me to go on to the resolution on budget deficit amnesty?
Yeah.
So we got this resolution from the ECC and oh God, I'm having trouble opening it.
I can read it, Antonia. I have it up on the screen.
Okay, please do.
Hi, CEC. Hope you are well. Okay, they're gonna share some information about.
No. The resolution calling for budget amnesty.
Oh God, sorry.
I've got it. Don't worry about it. Whereas in 2021, many public schools are burdened with significant budget deficits because actual enrollment is well below what schools could have reasonably projected during the pandemic. Whereas through last fall, many families made difficult and personal decisions to leave the public school system to enroll in education programs that provide more in-person learning and or safety when faced with the ongoing pandemic. Lack of clarity from the city about how and when schools would reopen, last minute reopening delays, health and safety concerns, blended learning options that typically provided only 1 to 2 in-person school days per week, and changing rules for opting back into blended learning all contributed to families making alternative arrangements. Whereas New York City public schools are primarily funded on a per student basis through the fair student funding. In late May, each school submits an estimated budget to the Department of Education for the next school year based on enrollment projections. B, each school is subject to mid-year adjustment of funding based on how actual enrollment compares to enrollment projections from late May. If a school student register exceeds its projection, the school will receive additional funds to support its operations. However, if a school's student register is below projections, the school must pay back funding for lost student enrollment. C, more than 90% of fair student funding is used to pay salaries for teachers and support staff, making mid-year adjustment extremely difficult for most schools. D, many schools are still not funded at 100% of the fair student funding formula, in essence, starting the school year with a deficit. Whereas under the DOE deficit repayment plan, schools with deficits greater than 100,000 typically repay funds over a several-year installment plan, saddling schools with debt during the time they need more resources, not less, to invest in staffing and technology and address learning loss and social emotional trauma suffered during the pandemic. Whereas in 2013, the DOE instituted an amnesty program in recognition of successive years of budget reductions following the Great Recession that made it difficult for schools to repay their deficits. Whereas the expenses associated with unforeseen events such as the pandemic should not be borne by individual schools. Therefore, be it resolved, CEC15 calls on the City of New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio, and the New York City School Chancellor Richard Carranza to institute amnesty for school deficits so that our schools can emerge from this pandemic financially sound and best positioned to meet the learning needs of our city's students. So this is very much about what we've been talking about all night. And so I think we can put this to public comment and CEC member questions and then have a vote.
Okay. Any comments from the public?
I don't see any.
I don't see any. Oh, there's one. Oh, environmental support.
I'd like to just make a motion to vote.
I second.
Motion by Camille. Camille.
I
vote?
vote to support the letter.
All right. Antonia,
I vote to support.
Tia,
Support.
Bess,
Yes.
Kimberly,
Support.
Claudia.
I support.
I do support. Mark,
I support.
the vote is anonymous.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Antonio. We're gonna move to the item is the draft of letter to Cuomo on fiscal year 22 budget of 2022.
Yes. Does anybody else want to read this? No?
You can read it. I'm ready now.
Who's that?
Bess.
You can read it?
Dear Governor Cuomo, it is with great sincerity that we write to you regarding reports of state supplementation of $4 billion in federal stimulus funds intended for localities for K through 12 education services, as well as concerns we have with the proposed 2021-22 New York State executive budget recommendations for elementary and secondary education. As members of the Community Education Council of District 15, we are in a unique position to advocate for public school parents and the schools in our communities. The PTA presidents of 18 of our district schools collectively wrote to us demanding that the state give schools their fair share of federal CARES Act funds. They were perplexed last year when the state cut school funding by the same amount granted by the federal government, in spite of the unprecedented challenges schools were facing. This pandemic adjustment meant New York State schools lost 1.1 billion in aid. In their words, quote, our school administrations are taking on heroic efforts to simultaneously fund two brand new and completely different school models during this time, hybrid and remote. The cost of running these programs effectively are unprecedented and required a wild reimagining of what the definition of school is. Our city leaders have a mandate to ensure our students are academically and emotionally supported, engaged, and educated during this time of crisis. Schools need additional technology, additional staff, and additional resources to meet the logistical and emotional strains brought on by the pandemic. To accomplish this, our schools need an increase in funding, not cuts, end quote. Unfortunately, the 2022 executive budget offers a bleak future for our students. On top of a pandemic adjustment of $4 billion, it fails to provide $4.1 billion in CFE, or Campaign for Fiscal Equity, funds owed to schools, and targets schools across the state with $2 billion in cuts in the absence of a third round of federal stimulus aid. These new cuts would have direct negative impacts on students. Schools faced tremendous hurdles this year, providing essential staff due to cuts and withholding of educational funds at all levels, despite the substantial costs associated with remote learning and the safe reopening of schools. And now schools that were already struggling to provide enough substitute teachers for hybrid learning will have to return money because of reduced enrollment. Further, the executive budget compounds the loss of CARES Act funds and cuts with gifts to the charter school industry. The budget steers per pupil funds away from traditional public schools towards the reissue of charters and encourages charter school co-locations by shifting the entire cost of reimbursing charters from market rate rents on private space to the city. These gifts add to the unprecedented amount of federal aid received by charters at the direct expense of public schools, which received neither. Therefore, we ask you to repeal the mandate to provide rent-free space to charter schools. This requirement applies exclusively and unfairly to charters located in New York City. Historically, New York City parents have experienced dissatisfaction with co-locations. We know that our children suffer significant loss of resources in co-located buildings. We also ask you not to reissue. We also ask that you not reissue any revoked charters. Enrollment is declining. This is not the time to authorize new experiments that drain already dwindling per pupil funds. We continue to support your advocacy in Washington for fiscal relief for states and local governments, but we urge you to create more permanent revenue streams. The fiscal year 2022 executive budget only implements a temporary surcharge on the wealthiest New Yorkers to raise $1.5 billion. Wealthy residents left New York City during the pandemic because our city stopped functioning, not because of new expenses. If New York is to achieve an economic recovery, we need reliable services. Implement progressive tax policy that invests in all our public resources, including public schools. Our children's futures cannot be contingent on federal action. And finally, we ask that you ensure schools receive the benefit of all federal aid intended for education. Students can wait no longer for fully funded, functioning schools. That's it.
Thank you, Bess.
Thank you.
No.
Um,
Any comments from the members or the public?
Antonio or anyone?
I don't have any comments.
Nigar had one comment.
Sorry, it's me, Bess. Is there data to back up that there's been dissatisfaction with co-location that we can drop into the letter?
I would say that that's experiential. I don't have data, but if you talk to any parent who has a child in a school that's, as soon as a charter is threatening a school of co-location, parents are up in arms. Camille.
I just wanted to speak to that co-location concept, because if we're just talking about District 15 specifically, we know that EHS has been very unhappy with their co-location, and 442 also is co-located. And 676 is co-located. So I just wanted to call out the schools that we know that are co-located.
Yeah, thank you for that, because we've had issues with parents have complained in each of those instances.
No, certainly, but the question is whether it will derail anything from the letter. I hope not. But.
It's a letter.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to that idea about the letter, I think that it's important that we do send the letter. And like my hope was that we were going to back up the letter with another resolution similar to the ECC one, but one of our own specifically, like where the ECC one, we're just kind of signing on to it. But I think that the more letters and resolutions that the state gets, the stronger that demand is going to be to just fund education in a better way.
Okay, thank you for that.
Do you want me to strike the whole paragraph about co-locations? I really don't think we want more co-locations.
No, it's not what I'm saying. I'm suggesting that it's such a hot button topic, and you know, if it would derail anything, it's a huge issue. It's not that people don't make a noise about it, but if there's no data, when you make a statement like, you know, it just brings up, there's another potential way to say it, but I like the letter strong. It's amazing, but
I guess,
That-
are you,
That's an issue, yeah, go ahead.
are you uncomfortable with making that statement? It is my experience as a parent leader in District 15 and speaking with other other CECs, that parents are unhappy when a school is co-located in their building. I don't have data. I have the experience of speaking with parents across the city.
Perhaps if you
If you're not
listed,
comfortable with that statement, then is that going to hold up your vote?
no, I think, this is Kimberly, I think that perhaps
Kimberly.
you just sort of described what the issues were with co-location. And just instead of just a general, people are unhappy with it. Well, why are they unhappy with it? Because it takes away from, support of the public schools that are there. It takes away from this, it takes away from that. It's not because they just don't like the way that people look. It's because of the lack of support that gets distributed in the school.
Well, the second sentence after that says, we know our children suffer significant loss of resources in co-located buildings.
Okay, so
Okay.
that speaks to it, yeah.
I mean, there's other issues there. I just wanted to make sure that if you're gonna make that statement, but that's not about holding up a vote. It's about making sure that I understood it all. So, got it. It's a letter. It's not a law. It's a good one.
I think that this discomfort, let's just say lightly, is with co-located schools around charters we hear it all over the city. Like, we go to the citywide meetings and there's very, very few stories about happy partnerships with co-located schools. And
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. I'm sure that's the case. It's just for someone who doesn't go to this, if you're just saying there's a general unhappiness, well, what are they unhappy about? So I don't doubt it. I'm just saying, as a recipient of a letter that I have perhaps I've not heard directly, maybe I want to know from the letter, what is it that people are complaining about? I don't doubt it. I'm sure that is the case. I just would want to know, if I were receiving this letter, for instance, as an example, or, just some of the things that you've been hearing.
They lose out on art rooms.
Exactly.
They end up having their pullouts or sets in glorified closets. They have to.
The cafeteria schedule is a disaster. There might be.
Ladies, I don't doubt it.
Well, the question is, should we put all that in this letter?
Periods of lunch.
The question is, how detailed do you want this letter in this one paragraph?
Do we want to just list 3-4 examples in that line item?
The letter we got from the Borum Hill parents itemized their list of complaints, which is what I think Antonio said, which could be an illustrative example, is that while the co-located charters eat up space and allow us to have art classes in a closet, they actually are unenrolled in the same co-located school and are eating up funds, which I think is the point. So I can support it either way, but I feel you, Kimberly. I think that tangible example, just so we're not it's not hyperbolic. We actually have the example in there that says, you could almost quote the Borum Hill parents from their letter and say, this is exactly what's happening. Why are we funding under-enrolled schools while we're taking away over-enrolled school space? Which is what's happening in Borum Hill.
Should I write, historically, New York City parents have experienced space and scheduling conflicts.
Among other things, and you can leave it, 'cause the rest of the letter has.
Perfect.
In co-location.
That's enough. That's enough,
Okay.
Antonio. You've done enough
We
work,
know that our
among
children-
other things.
Okay, all right.
So then
Yeah.
people
There we go.
Google that and they're reminded of the drama. But
Yeah.
There we go. The sentence now reads, historically, New York City parents have experienced space and scheduling conflicts in co-locations. We know that our children suffer significant loss of resources in co-located buildings. Is that sufficient?
So
Perfect. Great. Love it.
pay
Okay.
attention. Yeah.
We need to move on.
So, yeah, can we?
All right. I move to approve.
Okay.
I second. This is Tia.
Tia seconds. Okay. Camille,
Approved.
Antonia,
Approve.
Tia,
Approve.
Bess,
Approve.
Kimberly,
Approve.
Claudia,
Approve.
myself, I approve. Mark,
Approved.
thank you, council members.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What is in the? Sorry, folks, it's my first time doing this.
That's
You
okay.
know.
There's a call to action. There's a call to
yes.
action there.
You're doing a great job.
Amazing.
You are doing a great job.
Thank you.
So good.
You're totally roped into this next time.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think you
Not that
got
mad
it
at us.
down for
You did
next
it.
time you're on.
So good, Ivan.
I just gonna get better, right? Yeah, sure. Yeah. A call to action is our last item, and
Do you want to read the call to action, Ivan?
let me find it first. I don't know if somebody
Here,
has.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay.
There you go.
Antonio. Okay.
You got it, Yvonne?
Yes, I think I do. Okay. Call to action. Dear ECC members and families, this past year, Governor Cuomo received $4 billion from the federal government for education through the CARES Act. He then reduced the school funding by the same amount and withheld an additional 20% of the school funds. In other words, our schools never received their CARES Act funds and have been operated in a pandemic on 20% cuts. Now, he has released his proposed budget for the oncoming fiscal year, which offers a bleak future for our students. Unless New York State receives $15 billion in federal stimulus aid, the schools across the state could face more than $2 billion in cuts. To boot, many schools will have to return per pupil money because of reduced enrollment. Compounding all of this, the governor's budget contains gifts to charter schools. He steers per pupil funds away from traditional public schools toward the reissue of charters that were shut down because they failed to educate students. It shifts the entire cost of rental reimbursements on private spaces to NYC, which will only result in forced co-locations. All this as charter schools receive both federal CARES Act funds and PPP loans, while Cuomo took CARES Act funds away from our traditional public schools. The budget conversation in Albany has begun, and we need parents like you to impact it at the local level. Please reach out to all of your district, state senators, and assembly members. Tell them their voice on this matter makes a difference. New York City students and parents can wait no longer for fully funded, functioning schools. Find your state legislature, there's a link there, and urge them to give New York City schools their CARES Act funds and CFE funds. Cuomo can't balance his budget on the backs of children. Demand accountability and transparency reforms to charters. Call for an end to Sonny's unaccountable authorization power. Create more regulation and public reporting from charter schools and their private chartered management organizations. give CECs the ability to vote to approve charters in their community school districts, curb the grade revisions that allow for expansion, repeal the mandate to provide rent-free spaces to charter schools. This requirement applies exclusively to New York City. No other Department of Education in the state is required to do this. The proposed budget eliminates the state's reimbursement to New York City for the cost of charter schools rental assistance in an attempt to encourage the use of available co-located space within public facilities. Do not revive the zombie charters. Cuomo budget attempts to maneuver around the charter cap by reissuing the previously surrendered charters. With enrollment and decline in New York City, this is not the time to authorize new experiments that drain already dwindling per pupil funds with minimal accountability. This is the time to bolster and fully resource public schools. Create more permanent revenue streams. Our children's future cannot be contingent on federal action alone. The state must step up and do its job. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're not voting on this. It's just a call to action that the ECC sent out. And it's just encouraging people to contact their state legislature and
Get
urge
involved.
them to act on the various points listed.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to send that out to the public ASAP, and maybe, does it make sense to include the links, that one link about how to find out who your elected officials are?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Okay.
all right.
Somebody want to draft that cover page to the, I mean, not the cover page, like just a quick email with the attachment?
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Let me put that-
Adjourn. What is next?
So, I mean, it's 9:30. We're way over.
Oh, sorry.
Our parliamentarian did a fantastic job. Thank you. Thank you to everybody that's still on the call.
Thank you very
If there's
much.
no other business, I'll just say thank you for your dedication, the students of District 15 and beyond. And thank you to everybody who stayed on so late. Thank you, Anita.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay, so motion to adjourn at 9:32.
Good night.
Yes,
Oh.
second.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
I'll second.
Who's going to second?
Ivan.
Ivan,
I'm
me.
sorry, too. Thanks, Ivan. You did great.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good
Bye,
night.
bye, everybody.
Claudia. Thanks.